Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Look forward to hearing from you. This is another important hearing we're having to discuss the elevated threat of violence and terrorism against our houses of worship. Just over 2 years ago, a terrorist made his way to the congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas, and held 4 people hostage for over 10 hours. The perpetrator, Malik Faisal Akram, traveled to the United States from the UK with the intent to commit violence. I'm concerned that this attack was not prevented. Why was this person not on the government's radar, considering his criminal record and history of being investigated for terrorism in the United Kingdom? Why was he granted access to the United States under the visa waiver program, especially after he lied on his paperwork to Customs and Border Protection? In spite of his dangerous past, he was able to travel to the United States, fly from New York to Texas, illegally purchase a firearm. It was only after he attacked a synagogue that our law enforcement or Homeland Security officials detected a threat. The incident in Colleyville was a blatant act of anti-Semitism and terrorism against the Jewish community. For too long, Jews in the United States have been targeted and attacked for their faith, facing threats of harassment and violence at an exceptionally high rate. The Jewish community is the target now of more than half of all religious-based crimes, and yet the community only makes up about 2% of the U.S. population. The anti-Semitic violence has taken the lives of too many people. In 2019, 1 person was killed and 3 injured at the horrific attack against the Shabbat of Poway in California. In 2018, 11 congregants were killed and 6 injured at the Tree of Life Synagogue outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In the last 5 years, anti-Semitic incidents across the country have nearly doubled. Threats of violence go beyond just targeting the Jewish community. I often hear from faith leaders in Ohio that the Christian, Muslim, and Sikh communities continue to face threats of terrorism and violence. According to the Global Terrorism Database, terrorist attacks against religious institutions accounted for over 25% of all terrorist attacks within the United States between 2009 and 2019. That statistic is deeply troubling and threatens our First Amendment right to freedom of religion. Terrorists and extremists often target crowded spaces with little or no security. 3 years ago, an assailant with white supremacist views targeting the Mexican community opened fire at a Walmart in El Paso, killing 23 and injuring 24. The following night, an assailant with extremist left-wing views killed 9 and injured 27 on a busy Dayton street in my home state of Ohio. After seeing the devastating effects of terrorism across our houses of worship and communities, we are fortunate that the attack on the Beth Israel congregation this January didn't end up in the loss of innocent life. While the ultimate goal is to prevent these attacks from happening in the first place, this incident shows us how preparedness and security can prevent violent attacks from escalating to lethal ones. In particular, Congregation Beth Israel was a recipient of the FEMA's nonprofit security grant program. This program has funded the synagogue's camera system, among other things, and improved the facility's overall security and provided first responders with situational awareness during the standoff. There was also training provided. I've been a longtime supporter of the nonprofit security grant program. In 2019, I authored its first authorization, working with the chairman and others, working to expand it to all 50 states. I've also worked to double the funds from 90 to 180 million. In January, I led a letter to the Appropriations Committee for increasing funds to a level that reflects the growing terrorist threat to nonprofits and houses of worship. Last week, I was pleased that Congress appropriated $250 million to the program for fiscal year 2022. It's an increase that unfortunately is needed. In addition to the nonprofit security grant program, Rabbi Charlie Crichton Walker, who was a hostage at Colleyville, has credited security workshops and training sessions by federal and local law enforcement and nonprofits for providing the knowledge that saved his life. Unfortunately, many religious communities still don't know how to access these training or grant programs through the nonprofit security grant program. We need to do better. That's why I introduced the bipartisan Pray Safe Act with Senator Hassan, who's here today, Senator Peters, Senator Johnson, Senator Rosen, Senator Rounds. The Pray Safe Act directs the federal government to establish a centralized clearinghouse of safety and security best practices, training opportunities, grant application information, other assistance, all dedicated toward the simple goal of securing houses of worship against terrorism and violence. In the aftermath of this Colleyville attack, it's more necessary than ever that Congress quickly passes this legislation. We've held conferences in Ohio where we bring in the FBI, bring in Homeland Security, make sure that people understand what's available to them, and it's amazing, the uptake. So when houses of worship understand what they can have access to, including best practices, simple things, how to make their houses of worship more secure, they respond. As we work to prevent violent incidents from occurring, we must acknowledge that religious communities and other targets of terrorism are threatened by actors that hold a variety of ideological belief systems and motivations, and we cannot lose sight of the fact that there are concerning trends and threats posed by both homegrown and international terrorists. Again, I thank the witnesses for coming today. I look forward to your testimony and to your commitment for keeping Americans safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.